Hello and welcome back to the Premier Injuries podcast. Today we're talking all things injuries in the Premier League. As always, it's our star-studded lineup here with Dr. Raj and Mr. Ben Dinnery himself, and just me. I don't think I'm star-studded. I'm just kind of here. But this, as always, is at the same time through the season every Thursday. So if you have any inquiries, do comment or tweet us. Just get involved with the community. And obviously with this podcast, we're giving insights into players, injuries, return times, cutting through rumour or misinformation. It's the best place here. We don't have any false fake news or anything like that. But like I said, we've got Raj here today. How are you doing, Raj?
Not too bad. Just enjoying this international break, which somehow brings with it more work. But, it's how it goes.
Yeah. And have you been watching any of the international games? I mean, America were in action.
I've been watching here and there. I just haven't had enough time to really sit down and enjoy it. So it's been kind of just more snippets.
And also, I got to ask, is that a new mic there?
It's not. I just brought my normal one to the clinic. So
I've never seen him with that mic before.
I thought you had invited Marwan Fellaini into the office where you record.
I mean, that would be a very special podcast there. And Ben,
that's an odd position there.
Yeah. And Ben, as always, pleasure. We talk through the week, so I don't really need to welcome you. But are you keeping well too?
Always good, my friend. Always good. Always look forward to these chats with Raj. Brilliant insight. So yeah, fantastic. Looking to get cracking and looking forward to it.
And we were planning to go live today, but I've got a cough and just not feeling too well. So I don't know, Raj, Ben, can you give like a return to play when I should expect to be, at full fitness?
I'm saying career end, and it sounds terminal to me, Jay. So,
oh God, well, this could be one of the last ones as well. We better make it special. Let's get into the discussion points then. Let's start with Liverpool. I mean, you talked about terminal with me. There's a lot of problems going on there. Ben, do you want to open out what is happening at the club?
Right, where to start? In attack, Roberto Firmino. We talked about this hamstring recurrence, re-injury. We suspected that it would obviously be a longer than that, the initial injury that set him out a month. That looks to be the case. In and around mid-December is what we understand, but nothing official from Liverpool on that one. So good news for Diego Jota owners. That looks like he's going to be locked in. And also good news with regards to Mo Salah. He had an agreement with the Egyptian FA and Liverpool that he would have limited minutes in their dead rubber qualifier against Gabon. So he had around half an hour from the bench. Elsewhere, where to start? Sadio Mane, past fit. Aliou Cisse, coach of Senegal, said that he was withdrawn as a precaution after taking I think it was an elbow impact injury on the ribs. X-rays came back all clear. He has been training with the group, so all being well, he should be absolutely fine for the weekend. James Milner, hamstring, training outside but away from the players. Jordan Henderson, currently training away from the players. That's an adductor issue. Gareth Southgate said it was very minor. He didn't expect it to keep either Jordan Henderson or Jack Grealish out for too long. So there's a possibility that he could make the squad. Andy Robertson, that's a big concern. Pulled up with a hamstring-related problem in the qualifier against Denmark. Now, we're waiting for imaging results to come back on that one. But I suspect that this weekend's game will come too soon, even if it is on the good side of in terms of any damage to that muscle, especially as Tsimikas done so well when he came into that Liverpool team at the beginning of the season when Robbo was sidelined. Also, Divock Origi, dead leg, Belgium. He played that down post-match, so if needed, he should be in and around the squad. Curtis Jones, and this is someone that I like to sort of pass across to Raj. Now, it was hoped that Curtis Jones would be back in contention, especially given that, the question marks over Jordan Henderson. Of course, Harvey Elliott is also sidelined, and also Naby Keita. Curtis Jones, we were hoping would come back in. Jurgen Klopp described this as a freak injury on the training pitches to the eye, and he's hoping it was going to be around 2 to 3 weeks. But we've since heard from the club doctor, I think it's Jim Moxon, and he said that, we're looking at several weeks. They can't put a definitive timeline on it. We've just got to allow nature to take its course. But yeah, I mean, Raj, are you able to sort of maybe read between the lines and shed any light on as to what kind of injury you think that could possibly be to the eye?
Yeah, I mean, just based on what they're saying, I'm guessing it's probably some deeper cornea bruising or something like that. Might even have, popped a blood vessel, which doesn't really affect the eye from my understanding. But it's still, like he said, with the eye, there's so many variables involved. It's hard to give a timeline on it. And so you have to just simply, like, Dr. Jim Moxon said, is trying to play it by ear and let it go where it goes in that regard. And then also I think with the eye as well, it's that it's such a sensitive area that you don't want to risk it. Let's say the player comes back, gets hit in the eye again, takes an elbow or something of that nature. And so I think that's also part of that risk reward calculation as well. And then something I heard, I think James Pierce on Robertson had an update this morning, or not this morning for me, saying that there was no sign of an overt strain, so he's considered 50-50 for the weekend, which just means they'll be assessing him daily to see how he responds to training.
Yeah, cool. Raj, am I right in thinking if it was a burst blood vessel with Curtis Jones, then there would be certainly in terms of his training, because we have seen him doing gym work, trying to maintain those base levels of fitness, then he wouldn't really be involved in any kind of vigorous or intensive sessions, because that could maybe damage that repair even further?
No, not really. Again, it's not 100% my expertise, but once that blood vessel is damaged, it's more of just protecting the eye from more physical contact. That's my understanding.
Mm-hmm.
Let's move it on then. And, risk and reward was mentioned there early from the show. I mean, last week we almost went a whole show without the word risk and reward. I think we could...
Never again.
We'll get the T-shirts done, Raj. Don't you worry.
I mean, we should probably create a drinking game around risk and reward. I think it's such a vital phrase. But yeah, with just quickly on the Firmino situation as well, why is this one going to be, a bit of time with him? Can you kind of explain, Raj, the reasons why this one is going to take a little time to heal, and also the fact that he will probably be managed because of the Christmas schedule?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like it's a higher severity injury. It could possibly be a grade 3, which is a full rupture. We just don't know. They haven't released any information on it. I think the big reason for them to be conservative with him is his re-injury history as well. If you do bring a player back who has that injury history, it can make it more difficult. And so in his case, it's one of those things where, be conservative. And like you said, heading into the Christmas period, if he comes back mid-December, he's now coming into a schedule where the games come pretty thick and pretty fast. So you don't want to lose him again very quickly. Of course, that's going to impact the team itself in terms of on pitch, but it also puts other players into a predicament because now they have to play more minutes during a very, very heavily condensed and heavily congested schedule.
And the interesting thing will be is, again, using your phrase, the risk and reward, they'll need him in the new year when the likes of Mo Salah, Mane have to go off to the African Cup of Nations. So there is probably that calculation in mind as well. But let's move it to Leeds. And, again, it's another club with a lot of injuries. Ben, I don't know if you want to open up on that. And also, the Bamford situation, it's almost like the never-ending story with that one.
Yeah, Luke Ayling could be a player that is maybe in and around the squad heading into game week 12. But what we do know about Marcelo Bielsa, you have players who are ready to train, you have players that are ready to play, and then you also have a Marcelo Bielsa fit, which is another level. And we know that even the likes of maybe Calvin Phillips we've seen in recent times have only missed a handful of days, maybe 10 to 14 days out. And Bielsa has been very reluctant to throw those players back in. It was bench, it was minutes for the 23s. It was, and it was a couple of weeks before we start. So, we're looking at Luke Ayling now, who's been sidelined, I think, since game week 5, since he picked up that knee injury at Newcastle. So even if he is in and around that squad, I certainly can't see him being thrown back into the starting 11. And in a similar vein, we're getting a lot of questions with regards to Patrick Bamford. Now, this is a one that, came as a little bit of a surprise, both to us and I think ultimately the player himself, unless, he just come out straight lied about, where he was. Because during prior to the last international break, he spoke about the fact that he was due to go back on the training pitches and step up his recovery. He had been involved in some straight line running, and he was hoping to do some twisting and turning and be back in contention, which I think would have been in and around maybe game week 8, possibly game week 9. Of course, since then, Marcelo Bielsa, as usual, it depends on the evolution of the injury, but he also mentioned the fact that due to the complexities of this problem, he's just unable to give any kind of timeline or any kind of indication of when, Patrick Bamford will be back in contention for Leeds.
And so, throwing that to you, Raj, what does that kind of say to you in terms of the injuries? Is it does it meet any descriptions in your mind of certain injuries that players might have, or is this just a really peculiar position that we're in that we really can't even give a timeline of return?
Yeah, anytime it comes to ankle injuries, I'm always a little weary to give a return to play timeline, because you see when players start to go to those higher stress activities like Ben just talked about, the twisting and turning, is that the ankle takes on a lot of direct stress. And so it can lead to some of these kind of flare-ups that you may or may not have expected. And so that's why, for me, it's really difficult to give a timeline on ankle injuries, just because the variance is all over the place. And even potentially what you see with some of these injuries is there's a bone bruise that only manifests down the line. And bone bruises within the ankle can lead to very, very high variance return timeline. And even that depends on the specific location of the bone bruise. And so that's why in general, I'm always weary. And any time I talk about an ankle injury, or even in my videos, I always say, you have to just play it. You have to play it by ear a little bit and see how the player responds.
And I guess maybe that brings us a little bit to Kai Havertz. Ben, it's another odd situation where it's one of those injuries that I think a lot of people downplay, the dead leg. But it's another one that's not always straightforward.
Yeah, I actually had a question from somebody within the community. They put it out there, and they were talking about the Kai Havertz return to play. And they said, why don't you have him at 100%? This, by the way, this was prior to his return for Germany. And if you don't know the context of the conversation, Kai Havertz played 90 minutes, I think it was, against Burnley, but he picked up that injury after colliding with advertising hoardings. And obviously that injury evolved over the next 24 to 48 hours, and he hadn't been involved in any kind of training at all for Germany, and he missed that first qualifier. So yeah, going back to the point, they said, well, it's only a dead leg. It's just a knock. They're not serious. We've all probably, if you play any kind of sports, contact sports, then inherently we've all picked up a little bit of a dead leg. But what I try to explain is, recent examples, while the majority are absolutely fine, and we will see a return to play normally within a matter of days. I mean, we only have to look back to last season when Rafinha was hospitalised after suffering a dead leg, and he spent around about a month on the sidelines. And if we look back, even further in time, one that always springs to mind, and a good example I always use, was Christian Ziege. And that was not only, threatened his career, but was also life-threatening, and he required emergency surgery, to relieve the pressure in his leg caused by the calcification of that hematoma in his thigh.
And that's the interesting thing. So kind of throwing it to you, Raj, you said that he has returned for Germany, Ben, but is there still a risk going forward that there could be a recurrence or more problems associated with that? So he's not maybe out of the woods just yet.
Typically not. Typically in these cases, once it does resolve and you're cleared, there's a pretty good return to play consistency. The key is, like Ben said, is initially you just don't know how much it's going to impact the player in terms of function and in terms of pain. And so, yeah, the average is 2 to 3 days, but there's always those tails on each side of that distribution. And so, yeah, again, and especially as it comes to a player like Kai Havertz, it always made sense to be more on the conservative side.
And so I guess we'll move to the last discussion point, and this one is an interesting one. Cavani seems to have a tendon problem, Ben.
Yeah, well, it's an issue that he flagged up just prior to the international break. He was quoted, I think, in South American press about the issues that he's had in the build up to these qualifiers. And he talked about how in pre-season he had been managing a tendon problem, and that hampered his pre-season program. It restricted him, and he's almost been playing through, I wouldn't say the pain barrier, but he's certainly been playing with a niggling problem that he hasn't quite overcome. And I think ultimately now the decision's been taken to take a step back again as we approach this festive fixture period, where we need players at optimum levels, or certainly as best as it can possibly be, to try and survive, these close run of fixtures to get them through. So, yeah, we're in a situation where I think, Cavani hasn't been able to perform maybe as well as he could because of this problem. And now he's going to try and remedy that to make sure that he is available for these upcoming games.
And so what kind of process would Cavani have to go through there, Raj, to almost make sure that this doesn't happen? And I guess age is a big thing with him as well.
Yeah, I mean, age will be part of it. A lot of wear and tear on the body in general. I mean, a big thing that we don't know is, unless Benton has more information, is, what tendon it is and, when it really started. They haven't really released much information from my understanding. But in general, tendon injuries, especially if it's like a longer term, call it tendinopathy, versus something that happened in the short term, it sounds like it's a longer term thing. They can be really sensitive. And so if you overload them and keep playing through them, it puts you into this hole, and it really becomes hard to get out of that hole. So eventually you have to just back off the activity level, unload it, and then you restart with a gradual kind of, reloading, gradual exposure. And so that's what it sounds like with Cavani. And that timeline, again, depends on, is it, the Achilles tendon? Is it some other tendon? What is it? We don't know. That will really dictate just the true timeline and how conservative they're being with it.
And I guess as well, Cavani might be more at risk. You can correct me, Ben or Raj, on this, but he might be more at risk with this injury because of his play style. He's a very pressing forward. Maybe the difference with a lot of other Man United players is he is very proactive with the forward press, defending on the front foot.
Name names, Jason. Name names. Who you talking about?
I wouldn't like to say that any goats are, not doing that. But yeah, does that mean, like, because he's had a career where he has been proactive in his press, that his body will have adapted to it? Or, age, like we said there, this type of injury, does that mean that it's almost the play style has caught up with him?
I mean, I take that one. Maybe not. It's hard to say. I mean, of course, he's going to put more fatigue on the body. I think one thing this season is, with Ronaldo being there, his playing time might not be as consistent, which leads to more fluctuations in play and a decrease in overall fitness level. So some of these guys who play in games consistently, they build up that fitness via games. Now, if you're not playing as often or not used as often, now your fitness is fluctuating, and that can lead to some of that injury risk.
Anything that you wanted to add there, Ben?
I was only just going to add, the fact that, again, we're looking at a unique set of parameters within the Premier League. It's unique.
Yep.
It's dynamic. Forget about the distance covered, particularly when we're talking about Cavani. It's those high intensity runs, and it's the demands that he's placing on his body. And, at 34 years of age, if I've got that right, like I say, it does begin to catch up on you, regardless of, and he does look after himself incredibly well. But, there will be a point where your body just, cannot cope with the demands of the game, particularly in the Premier League, and particularly when, United are under pressure and the, certain aspects of the media and supporters are grabbing hold of a narrative of, we're not pressing, we're not working hard enough, and psychologically, that pushes players to places where, they may not want to be necessarily.
So with that is all the discussion points for this week's podcast. I hope you've enjoyed it. Please do subscribe to the channel because, we do have Dr. Raj on, but we do have Dr. AJ at the moment as well because we're doing Movember stuff. And just quickly on this, Raj, I want to ask your opinion. Do you think, Ben already knows what I'm going to ask, do you think that this counts as a moustache for Movember? It's a goatee look. The rest is all cleanly shaved.
Raj, do the right thing, Raj.
That's an easy no.
Yeah.
Shouldn't even be a question, really.
Oh my gosh. We'll end the podcast right there. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you again next week. Like I said, do check out the rest of the channel. We've got lots of good content. We've got Fantasy Premier League. We've got proper kind of analysis with Dr. AJ as well in terms of medical problems that could affect you for Movember. We're messing about with the Movember stuff, but there's also some serious topics as well. Men's health, prostate cancer, testicular cancer. Do check those out. And of course, check out Raj as well over at 3CB Performance. Amazing content. Just such good analysis. And again, somebody else who doesn't engage in fake news, rumor, misinformation. He just tells it as it is. But for now, I'm going to say goodbye and I'm going to go and cry because I've had my dreams dashed that this goatee is not a moustache for Movember. But cheerio, everybody.